Hi everyone, I'm Eleanor. I'm a sophomore majoring in public policy here at USC, and I'm an administrative coordinator at the Center for the Political Future. I'm here with some really amazing, accomplished women to talk about politics and being a woman in politics. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves and just tell me a little bit about what you're interested in politics.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. And thank you to the Center for the Political Future for inviting me back. This is such a great event every year, and kudos to all of you for being here and sticking it out throughout the day. Got here in the rain, and now you have the sunshine to as your gift for doing that. So my name is Noelia Rodriguez, and I actually 2 years ago was a fellow at the Center for the Political Future. So even for people who are not under the age of 40, there's still hope in politics. And I have loved politics for probably the last 30 years. When I first got into politics, I actually had never even thought about going into politics, and all of a sudden I found myself being the press secretary to the mayor of Los Angeles, right down the street here at City Hall. And I never looked back. I loved it ever since. I ended up, my highest political position was at the White House when I was the press secretary and director of communications to First Lady Laura Bush, under President Bush, for number 43, when he was in office for the first term. And here's a little secret. At that point, I was a lifelong Democrat. I'll turn it over to Natalie.
Hi, I'm Melanie Mason. I am a reporter, so I sit on the other side of a lot of the conversations that we have here. I'm with Politico. I'm born and raised here in LA. I worked at the LA Times for 12 years before moving over to Politico last year. And I focus on California politics, everything from what's going on in the mayor's office, to the governor's office, to the House and Senate races, to anything else that I find interesting that's going on in the state. And my very sort of quick how I got into political journalism was that I didn't want to go into political journalism. I, in fact, applied for every job that existed that did not have anything to do with political journalism. And sometimes the stars align in ways that you can't really sort of control. I had gone to school to undergrad at in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown. And I think just sort of being in the ether of politics there. Did we lose my mic? We did.
Oh, we might have lost the mic.
Oh, that was a sign to stop talking, I think. But the short answer to that, the short way to end that, we'll try that again, was that after applying to every internship that existed, Politico, actually, I'm going to take this personally, applied for every internship under the sun. The only one that I got was a political journalism one, and I think that then built onto itself. Applied for every other full-time position that I could get. The only one I got was a political journalism one, and at that point you just kind of accepted your fate. And almost 15 years later, it turns out that political journalism has been a really great career, so love to talk about that more. Maybe you'll have better luck.
I mean, we'll see. Yes, no? Okay. My name's Ashley Fumiko Dominguez. I'm the Director of Federal Relations at UCLA. I know that seems a little odd that I'm here across town. My boss knows, your Federal Relations team knows, but I'm always happy to be here with all of you. I think this is a really special day, and I think it's really important for you to think about these things that we're talking about at your age and at every age. I never planned on doing anything with politics ever. I got into politics by way of public service. So I studied international relations in undergrad and grad school, and I thought I was going to the Foreign Service. I graduated during the middle of the Great Recession, and I couldn't get a job. And so I took an unpaid internship with my hometown member of Congress, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and the rest is kind of history, right? I worked for the Speaker. I also worked for Senator Dianne Feinstein, my hometown, senator. And then when I moved to LA, Speaker Pelosi helped me find a position with Congressman Liu, who at that point was a freshman. And so I got to help him start out his LA office. And then I moved to UCLA 6 years ago, and I kind of worked my way up, and now I'm the Director of Federal Relations there. It's super fun. And I still don't think of myself as somebody that I just work in politics. I'm a public servant, right? And it just so happens that the service that I do is in the realm of politics.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here again. We're excited to have you. I'll ask you a few questions, and then at the end I'll open it up to the audience for any other questions. But I'll just have you start off by sharing, I'm curious, What has been your most eye-opening or like valuable political experience that convinced you that you were in the right field? And I'll start with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, like my colleagues here, I never thought I would be in politics. In fact, I said to myself, I never want to be in politics when I was, in college and even starting out before that in high school. It never even was a possibility. So when I went to work at City Hall right down the street here on Main Street, as the press secretary to the mayor, my eyes were opened every single day because no 2 days were the same. And I learned so much because, from everything from the LAX and the operations at the airport to the LAPD to economic development, working with journalists, knowing how to do that in a way that you would advance the priorities of the city, which were determined by the mayor and the city council, and also being an advocate for the people who live in the city. So you got to do both sides of that. You got to see how things happen. The thing I love about local government is you see the results of your labor. You could be volunteering for a department, or even when you're on a campaign, you see the results of what you have put into it immediately, and that's quite rewarding. And then if you go into other areas, the state or the national level, you might not get to see the results, but you know that you've made a difference because somewhere down the road you're going to hear from a constituent or a business owner or a woman business owner who says, thanks to that initiative, I'm a success in what I chose to do with my personal life and my professional life. I'm a little bit different because, again, I love being on the panels with my colleagues here because I learn from them every year. But for me, when I look back on my career, what I feel so blessed about is that there was this thing called bipartisanship when I went to work in government. For example, in Los Angeles, people don't run for office as a Democratic or Republican city council member. They just happen to be that, but they're city council members and the mayor. But everybody knows now it's majority Democrat. When I got into it, we had probably 1/3 Republicans and 2/3 Democrats. But the priority always was, what is in the best interest of the city? And I was fortunate enough to be in those closed door meetings when negotiations were going on, and you could see the game of chess, if you will. If I give you this, how does it help that? And at the end of the day, it wasn't about who got the credit, it was about getting something done. Now I'm an optimist because we don't have that now. It seems now, you're on social media, you see all these things, old school TV, newspapers, or journalism, as Melanie is in. You just don't see that anymore. There's so much demonization. Making you look bad makes me look good. Even in their own party. I mean, there's one party, they're eating their young these days, and that just was never heard of. I would challenge you to be the ones who make the pendulum swing back in the direction where you do work. I mean, I have chills as I'm telling you this, where you do work with people who maybe don't have the same ideas, opinions, or goals that you do, but have the same values. They just get to the values in a different way. That's where you can make a difference, going into public service, as Ashley says, or politics, ultimately, if you want to go into politics. But democracy is hard. You have to be active to make it work. And the first step, I don't know how old you are, but if you're 18 years old, the first thing you have to do is register to vote. That way you will have a voice, and a voice that matters. Even if the people or the initiatives that you vote for don't pass, then you still have the right to complain and criticize later on. But vote, that's the most important thing to start with at the early age.
So, as a journalist sitting here, when I cover politics, I'm not rooting for a particular outcome, right? I'm rooting for a good story more than anything else. The competitive part of me wants to know things before my competitors know it. And I want there to be transparency. I want people to be finding out more about what's going on in their government. So Eleanor, thinking about your question, I think that there was one point where I was having so much fun doing that. I was up in Sacramento. I was covering state politics for the LA Times, and there were some major climate change initiatives that were moving through the state capitol at that time. And my then colleague, very good friend of mine, and I decided we were going to pair up to just kind of own this story. We were going to cover it from all angles, and there was a lot of angles to cover, right? It was, first of all, just kind of where are the votes? Who's going to vote for this thing? Why are they voting for it? What's the motivation? Who's spending money to try and influence these votes? Where's then Governor Jerry Brown? What is he trying to do to make this work? The legislative leaders, the Republicans, who even though they're a little bit less relevant in Sacramento, actually had some like pretty interesting games in place. So all of that stuff of just putting together a good yarn. And for 2 consecutive years, we would cover every sort of incremental development, and then once these bills passed or failed, we would do what we call a TikTok, which is sort of a behind the scenes, like here's how this all happened, where we got to just throw in all of the fun little, like here, they were having a secret meeting here, and then this was, all of the kind of whodunit. And those stories were so much fun to do because it was so fun to be able to see from all angles the way that these major pieces of legislation came together. And the point where it felt really gratifying for me was there was kind of 3 years in a row where there was big climate legislation that came up. And I think that third year dovetailed with a presidential election year. So both my colleague and I were out covering the presidential trail. And so we didn't do a big TikTok because we didn't have time. And the number of people, particularly in the Capitol, but they came and they're like, are you doing a TikTok this year? What happened? And it was like, yeah, like we had sort of built up this brand of come to us and we'll tell you the behind the scenes. And the high-minded reason we want to do this is because this is important legislation. It's important for everyone to know. And the more low-minded reason, which is just as much a motivator for us journalists, is like it was really good gossip, and it was really good to be able to sort of like peel back the curtain. And so I think from my side of the equation, that's maybe we're not necessarily rooting for we want this to pass or to fail, but we want to explain what's happening and why. That was a really, really fun moment for me.
So really talking about Congress, when people think about it, they think about 20 votes for a speaker getting ousted, people that can't talk to each other, it being just completely dysfunctional and nobody getting along. And that may or may not be true, but there's a whole other side of it that it's people that are helping people with real issues in their lives. And so for multiple members of Congress, I have gotten the honor of doing something called casework, which is really opening up the lines of communication between a constituent and a federal agency. So this is somebody that has been trying to get a hold of Social Security. They've been on the phone for 15 hours, they've stood in line, and they just can't get their answer. And they can go to their member of Congress, to any member of Congress in the country, and open up something called casework. And so when I first, all my background is in international relations. I knew nothing about domestic politics until I started working for Speaker Pelosi. And so I didn't know what casework was. And so when I first learned about this and I started doing casework, I was super excited to realize there was a nonpartisan part of the job and that I could really help one person with one issue.
Why should women care and be involved in politics, and why should they care about voting? And Melanie, I'll start with you this time, then we can wrap around.
Well, I think Noelia made the good point, which is you can't complain about it if you didn't weigh in on it in the first place, right? I mean, voting is kind of the purest form of you being able to weigh in and help shape your government. And to be fair, I think to people that's my job, especially, I don't know how many of you, if you're even old enough to vote in the primary that just happened a couple weeks ago, but I got my primary ballot, and I knew about the top races, but I don't know, there's a lot of judges you're asked to be voting on. There's a lot of people on the school board. I mean, it is even doing something as what we think as a sort of like the basic thing is voting, like puts a lot of pressure on you as a voter to educate yourself. And I think that and especially now as our media landscape has shrunk the way it has, it's not always super easy to find that information. So, as a fellow voter, I can relate in that I'm a political reporter, and I left a bunch of races blank on my ballot because I just did not feel informed enough to cast a decision. All of which is to say, though, is that you don't need to have a decision about every single race in order to weighing in at all, even if it was voting for one race. I think just showing that active participation. Because here's another thing, which is kind of the interesting sort of behind the scenes of how politics works. is that for every voter that there's so much data and there's so much money going on to sort of model you as a voter. So if you're somebody that returns your ballot every time, you will be seen as somebody who is seen as a likely voter. Campaigns will interact with you in a different way. Your representatives will think about representing you in a different way. They're basically, in fact, one time when I moved back to California from Washington, D.C., I hadn't changed my registration. And at one time I was talking to a political consultant, and I think I joked about like, oh, I have to like get around to like re-registering to vote. And he goes, if I looked you up in the system right now, would it show that you're not registered to vote? And I had this like chill come over me, like, oh God, they're gonna actually like out me as a political journalist that wasn't registered. So there is a vast sort of industry, and this isn't going to sound like Big Brother-ish, although maybe it is, but there is a lot of people who have a lot of interest in knowing who the voters are. And so your activity as a voter, if you establish yourself as a regular voter, you're going to be hearing from campaigns more often. Campaigns are going to know, like, oh, okay, the 18 to 29-year-old women in this district have a higher voting turnout. We should think about that when we're thinking about legislation to sponsor. We should think about that when we're thinking about issues that we should champion. And so I think a lot of times, understandably, I think individual voters feel very disconnected from the people that are representing them because they think like they don't know what I care about. But they are sort of watching to see if you care about voting. And if they feel like there is a constituency that is going to show up, they will be more responsive to them. And so I think that it is, I have since re-registered to vote as a no party preference voter, which means that I can get mail from both parties, and people will try and reach out for me. But it is a little bit shocking to find out how much people are looking at each individual person, campaigns are, and trying to decide how much resources they are going to make to court you. And by voting, you make yourself very courtable, very attracted to these politicians, and that means that then your input, if somebody comes and knocks on your door and says, hey, I'd love for you to vote for me for city council, if you're somebody who in their system is seen as a regular voter and you say, yeah, but I'd really like to talk to you about the sidewalk that's on my street that looks like it hasn't been repaired in 3 decades, that your voice carries a lot of weight when they know that you're somebody that's likely to vote. So I think that that's a reason why voting is so important. It establishes you as somebody early on that needs to be paid attention to.
For me, I think voting goes back to like civic duty, right? I talked a little bit about my deep call to public service, and that I think is rooted in civic duty, and voting is one of those things. It's something that you need to do in order to ensure that you are uplifting those around you. And it's not just people that are on the ballots, it's also issues. So in this last election, I don't know if any of you, my husband and I do a lot of biking, and like biking, not like motorcycle biking, although I think he wishes I would go on the motorcycle with him. I will not, it's too dangerous. But we ride our bicycles. And we're always talking about the lack of bike lanes here in South LA. We are South LA residents. It is not the same bike lane landscape as it is on the west side. And there was just a measure on the ballot that is going to force the city to reassess bike lanes, right? I got to vote for that. That matters to me in my everyday life. And one of the panelists said here earlier, if you don't vote, you really can't complain about it, right? So I want to be able to complain about it.
I like complaining.
So I'm going to vote. I also do feel like when I get my ballot and I get my little book, you get a ballot, you get a book, you get a bunch of stuff, which I ignore, but I get the ballot and I get the book, and there are always 5 million things in there that I don't know about. And I am the crazy person that like blocks off like 4 hours on my Sunday and I research every judge race, every school board race. I look up the candidates, I watch what I can, and I do a top to bottom ballot. So I vote for every race, every measure, and I get so much mail because I vote every election for every single thing. And so I really do think it's a way to ensure that you're contributing to your community, but it's not just voting in like the big election stuff. It's also joining your neighborhood council and doing voting there. It's, joining, other things where you can vote, right? You really can use your voice in a way that can uplift you and uplift others that maybe aren't in a position to vote, like our friends that are undocumented, like our friends that just feel too stressed or nervous to do it, our friends that have literacy, that don't have the literacy capabilities to feel like they're comfortable to do it, right? And so you can help give those people a voice as well.
Oh, my turn?
Yes.
So, I was going to tell a story, but I'm going to really date myself. But whatever, I'm going to date myself.
I was like, I want the story.
I know. Okay, so we all know 18 is the age to vote, right? Well, guess what? I turned 18 the year that 18-year-olds got the right to vote. But my birthday is November 18th.
Oh.
So I had to wait till I was almost 22 for my first vote, which was really frustrating. But so to me, it's real how important it is to vote. I've always been a responsible voter, and I love standing in line to vote. I love it when there is a line to vote. You know, that just tells you that people are engaged and are interested and are really making a difference. But one of the things that I heard you talking, I think, Ashley, you were talking about the mailers, and you also, people are tracking you. It is Big Brother, by the way. Or it should be Big Sister, actually. But what I was going to say is, you will get all of these mailers, and you're just like, oh, another mailer, another mailer. I used to just throw them away. Now I collect them, and I actually read them because I'm really fascinated with the campaign aspect of the mailer. And that's another aspect of political life or public service. You know, you might go into being a political campaign consultant or an ad consultant, looking for the narrative. What is the story they're putting out there? And then you start questioning, is that right? Is that true? Is that factual? And that makes you a more informed constituent. But I'm going to tell you, so we think about people tracking you now in like 2024, and they know what time you get up, what time you go to bed, what you do during the day, everything in between. In 1988, against dating myself, but I'm proud of the rings on this tree. I bought my first house at the age of 28. And I struggled and saved for years on a single income to buy my first house as a single woman. It was an election year in 1988, and I told you I was a Democrat from day one when I registered on almost the age of 22. I got a mailer at my house from George Herbert Walker Bush, who was the vice president under Reagan and was running for president. It said, "Congratulations on the purchase of your new home."
Wow.
Thanks, due to your dedication and your hard work and blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember what the rest of it said, but that he knew and he recognized that I had just achieved this lifetime milestone on my own. I voted for George Herbert Walker Bush because it was so powerful. It spoke to me, and they knew what they were doing, and good candidates with good campaign staff and consultants know what they're doing.
Absolutely, all excellent points that you brought up, and I'll just plug again, a lot of people here are not yet 18, but if you're 16 or 17 in California, you can pre-register to vote, and you'll be, the minute you turn 18, your registration becomes active, so it kind of dodges any problems you might have if you wait. So my next question, and I'll start with Ashley this time, is how can young women start in politics, and where do we begin?
This is an easy answer. It's internships. And you thankfully have a benefit that wasn't around when I was your age and when I was an intern, and the fact that there are now many paid internships. Back when I was coming up, there were not paid internships, and at least not in Congress, and so it really was a barrier, a socioeconomic barrier, right? And I remember when I was thinking of making the transition to DC because I couldn't get a job during the recession at a federal agency, I had to take a second job and I had to take a third job to save enough to go and take an unpaid internship. And so it used to be a huge barrier. But it is the way that you learn what you like, what you don't like. It is the way that you learn what industries you want to be in, or these people you want to associate with. It's a way you build skills. If they're not going to, they're going to pay you in money now, but they're also going to pay you in experience. up until very recently, I've always kept the interns as managing the interns as part of my job, even though I don't have the time or the bandwidth to do it, because it was so important for me to ensure that they had a solid foundation. So finally, one of my staff members grappled it away from me. They're like, "You don't have time for this anymore." It's like, okay, got it. But I do think that it's really important to do that. And I have had so many students over the years say, "I've learned so much from you. I never want your job. I never want to work in your industry. I never want to," and that is a good thing, because they have already figured out when they're a high school student, when they're a college student, okay, I don't want to be a congressional staffer. Okay, I don't want to be a lobbyist. And so that gets something out of their way to help free up the path to what they're supposed to do. So I would say intern. If you have the ability, I would also say volunteer if you have, the means to do that. But intern, and try different things. Do an internship in finance, even if you have no interest in it. Do an internship at a hospital. I don't know, like pick something. Do an internship at, at a courthouse, right? Like pick things that are so, even if you think this is what you want to do, pick other things just to either reinforce it or expose you to something new.
I'll go to you next.
Challenge yourself. That's a good one. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll go to you next.
Did I already answer that? What was the question again?
Or getting our start.
Oh, getting
Start.
our start. Sorry.
Like internships
I'm
is
so
the
involved in
question.
the internship story. I'm like, oh my God, what's the question? Sorry. Well, yeah, that's the logical one, and it makes total sense. Volunteer for a campaign. If there's somebody that is running for school board, that's how a lot of people get started locally in your neighborhood, running for school board or as part of a commission for a city.
I think it's one of us.
It's probably mine. Or a council or mayoral. You never know. They love having, energized and active and people who are willing to do whatever it takes to be on a campaign. I remember when I was at Harvard University, I was the director of the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. And what we did there was we hosted just speakers from all over the world on politics and public service. And the hot ticket when would that have been? In 2009? It was right after, wasn't that when President Obama got elected in 2009?
Mm-hmm.
So right after that campaign, a few months later, we had David Plouffe as one of our speakers, and he had been President Obama's, one of his two campaign managers with David Axelrod. Great guy, so is David Axelrod. We had him on our board. Amazing people, smart and really down to earth at the same time. But David Plouffe had the same question, and here's the thing he saw in the campaign and he'd seen in other campaigns. Young people want to get on the campaign and they want to be the campaign manager right away. And he said, no, I need you to start by putting out lawn signs, making phone calls, going door to door. I mean, obviously not alone because you have your buddy system, but doing the things at the street level, being a good pedestrian so that you see people face to face, eye to eye, and you know what people are thinking about, what they're concerned about, what they're worried about, so that you can then take that valuable information and take it back to the campaign office, headquarters, consultant, even the candidate herself, and tell them what people are saying to you and what's important, because that will ultimately shape not only the platform, but what they do once they get into office. And it seems so, every day, but it's important. You have your eyes and your ears, and you then take that information into your brain and go back and use your mouth to share it with the campaign and with the consultant, and especially with the candidate, if you can. And also, it's a long-term game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So when you become the candidate, all of these things that you will have heard about in your journey in life will inform you to have you become a better candidate. That really makes a difference for your constituents.
Yeah, I think both of these answers are right. I think internships and campaigns, both. I mean, campaigns in particular is such a young person's game because y'all are like built to be like running on pizza and 3 hours sleep, and like as we get older, that looks less and less pretty. But I think that is huge. I also think that working on campaigns helps sort of build a little like in the trenches mentality that you bond with the people that you work with. And to your point about being a long game, the people who the person who recruited me to come work at Politico was my competitor and across the street neighbor when I was at the LA Times, and he was at Sacramento Bee, and we stayed very, very good friends for 10 years. And then he called me one day and said, I think you should come over to Politico. So the long game is real. Journalism is its own beast, and if anybody's particularly interested in political journalism, come find me afterwards and we can talk about this industry that's a bit of a dumpster fire, but I still have hope. But I think in general, for any like getting started anywhere, the one thing I would really prioritize when you're looking for experience is like find experience where you can be in the room with more experienced people, because the single most important thing for me as I got started was eavesdropping. Listening to more experienced people do their jobs completely taught me how to do mine. And I think now it's so easy to do everything remote. We all, take classes remote, we have meetings remotely. I work remotely, I work out of my house. But if I didn't have, at that very beginning, the ability to share a desk, sit across the way from reporters who were Pulitzer Prize winners and be like, oh, that's how they talk to their source. That's how they do interviews. They would bring me along to meetings that they would have with sources and, would make me sound more important than I actually was. And I would just sit there and absorb all of it. And so I definitely think as you're thinking in any field, but I think particularly in politics, the ability to just be sort of surrounded by other people's experience. And even if you're not getting the super high-end job, even if you're the one hanging door knockers, but you're out walking with the person who, maybe is the deputy campaign manager and you're listening to their phone calls in the background where they're talking to the fundraiser about something, all of that stuff becomes accumulated knowledge that then helps you get that next job.
Awesome. Okay, all great advice. Thank you. So shifting gears a little bit, as a woman, what kind of challenges or stereotypes have you encountered throughout your careers? And I'm curious if you can share how you handled them and just in general if you have any advice for navigating power structures. I'll start with you.
Of course. Let's see. I mean, there's so many things going through my head right now. Because I had the double whammy of being a woman and being a woman of color. And I didn't start out in politics, as I said earlier. I actually went to college at night while I was working full-time during the day. And I worked at a local company, a utility. And I mean, I was always a believer that you work hard and you prove yourself and you nose to the grindstone, you're going to get rewarded. Don't do that. It doesn't work that way. Yes, you should work hard and you should be smart and all of that, but you should also be raising your hand and putting yourself in spaces where you learn from others. I was going to say, as Melanie was talking, is we all know you're smart, but it doesn't do you any good to act like you're the smartest person in the room. You want to be in a room with people that are way smarter, as you said, Melanie, and then speak when you really know what you're talking about, because that's how you earn your brand, if you will. But going back to the double whammy, I mean, I saw it. It was there. Other people who were less qualified than me, and I was administrative. I was an administrative employee. I wasn't in the professional ranks. I didn't get a professional position until I had that diploma from college, and it said, oh, officially I'm smart, so now I could start getting promotions, despite the fact that I was a loyal and hardworking employee. So don't wait for your turn, make your turn. And that's what I would say as a woman. I mean, I've been very fortunate in my life to see so many historic events related to women. When I was younger than you, Roe v. Wade became the law of the land. Sadly, 2 years ago, I witnessed it being reversed and made me incredibly sad, because I had seen the span of all those years of women having that right. And so I hope I'm not rambling, but I really just want to say, you are going to come across obstacles. Some of you more than others, but there's always going to be an obstacle. I'm not saying that to scare you or to intimidate you, but look at it as, okay, I now put on my problem-solving hat and figure out a way to get around it. It's not, and then later on you're going to see, oh, that was really a gift, because it made me a better, more strategic, more intelligent person to get to where the ultimate goal was. I hope that makes sense.
I'll go to you next, Melanie.
I think as being a woman and a political reporter, there are going to be some inherent disadvantages. Like I remember one time I was on Capitol Hill and we were trying to get Senator Joe Manchin. I was in a scrum of people and we were covering gun control stuff, and we were following him because you'd see these lawmakers in the hall and you would sort of like buttonhole them and pin them, and we rove in packs as journalists and start shouting questions at him. And I remember that at one point where I'm mid-question, I was asking a question, I was really young also, and I got him to ask a question, and we're walking and talking, and he walks right into the men's room. And I'm like, what am I doing with this? And like there were a couple male reporters who like kind of went in after him, and it was I probably at this point I probably would have just gone into the men's room, let's be honest, because but I had this moment of like, oh, I'm a woman and I can't go in there and there's block off. I've had lawmakers who won't meet with me in their offices alone. They'll want somebody else in there, which I'll understand for maybe appearance or propriety reasons, but it also sometimes changes the tenor of those conversations if you're trying to end. Sometimes that's just a reality. Sometimes there will be areas where it'll be harder for access when you're a woman. On the flip side, some of the most sort of important and consequential reporting I did was when there was a major Me Too string of scandals in the Sacramento Capitol, and I sort of led that reporting. And absolutely the reason that I was able to lead that reporting is because I was a woman and was able to build trusting relationships with women who were telling these stories. And I had male colleagues who were wonderful, incredible people to work with who kind of said, like, you have to take the lead on this one. Like, it's not going to be our job to sort of mansplain sexual harassment in the Capitol. And so all of which is to say is that, like, it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag, right? There will be times where being a woman will feel like it makes it harder to penetrate certain worlds, and in other ways you're able to build empathy and build relationships, just as I think, if you're coming from a certain background, a certain racial ethnic background, a geographic background, I mean, ways that you build relationships, like not everybody's going to be able to build a relationship the same way. So I think being cognizant of those times where it might be a little bit harder as a woman is helpful, but if you fixate on them and make it feel like that you can't ever get past that obstacle, then you kind of sort of psych yourself out. So I would say it's like, there's a reality check that those obstacles are there, but there are also opportunities. And I think that the opportunities, for me at least personally, have been way more meaningful than the times where I got shut out.
Yeah.
I'm going to piggyback a little bit on what both of my colleagues said. I too have the double whammy, and I wish it wasn't still a thing, right? Being a woman of color in a world of politics has not been easy. And there's another level to this that I didn't even realize was an issue until I got to Congress, is that I'm not an Ivy League kid, right? I'm very proud of where I went because I put myself through college and grad school, but I went to San Francisco State University. It's a CSU. And when I got to Congress, people looked at me like I was a joke. They're like, you're never going to get a job. Well, joke was on them. I turned an internship into a job in 3 weeks. Thank you very much. But I think that there's another piece to this, right? I didn't know the language. I didn't know the uniform. I didn't know how to wear my hair because it's dark and it was long, and you're not supposed to have long hair after your shoulders. Like, there were all these arcane rules that I didn't know how to navigate. And so I remember having to just like figure it out and bundle through it and make a lot of mistakes and embarrass myself a bunch of times until I started figuring out, my uniform, my armor, or whatever you will. And I think that helped, right? That built a little bit of confidence. I have been in more situations than I care to admit where I have had people be extremely racist to me at a table, become extremely sexist to me at a table, and it's like microaggressions, like, oh, can you get me some coffee?
Yeah.
Wow, you're offering to get coffee? I'll take a tea. I don't drink coffee, right? You just have to find a way to combat it. Or, wow, you are so beautiful. Well, thank you. I'm also brilliant. So back to my point, right? So really finding a way to make them feel like what they're doing is inappropriate without burning the relationship. Because sometimes the people saying these things are elected officials, right? Or big donors or people you can't really piss off. I think the other part of it to remember is that I am often the only woman at a table. I'm often the only person of color at a table. And I was at an event a few years ago, and there was this remarkable woman, and she was speaking, and she said something I will never forget. She says when she goes into a room like that, and she's the only woman, she has the confidence of 50% of the population of the world, because that's who she's speaking for. And that really resonated with me. And I think the other part of it is that, you hear this phrase, fake it till you make it, and you don't really know what that means. That means you just go through the motions until you push past your imposter syndrome and it feels natural. And so I had to fake it for a really, really long time until I finally was like, oh no, I belong at this table. Thank you very much. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
I rambled a little bit at the end, but.
No, absolutely. That was great. Thank you. So I just have a couple more questions, and we'll open up to Q&A so we can try and speed run these questions a little
Okay.
bit. But so much of politics depends upon networking. I'm just curious what advice you each would give the students here today about networking and successful relationship building.
I'll go first.
Okay.
Start now. Look to the people to your left and your right, behind you, in front of you. Leave here with at least 10 new connections that you had when you first got here. Because you will have this day as a shared experience going forward. And at some point, you're gonna ask, oh my gosh, what did they say? Or did I understand it that way? Or I'm thinking about doing this, do you wanna join me? Or are you doing something? Can I join you? Because this day you will have in common for the rest of your life and nothing else like today. So start now, because I guarantee you that 10, 15, 20 years from now, when you get out of college or in the workforce, at least one of those connections is still gonna be a connection for you. Or even us, so many of these things we go to, I'm sure you do the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna call you, I'm gonna get you, and they never do, nobody ever calls. So that's why we're here, to make it as informative for you going forward. And even if you just, text us or whatever, DM, whatever the technology in 2 years is going to be, just do it. Because we were all in your place at one point. We didn't know what questions to ask. We didn't even know the answers. But at least ask the question, and you will find somebody. And I hope that's quick enough. But my challenge is, don't leave here without 10 new contacts, and then use them.
I 100% agree with that. My quick piece of advice is that nobody hates an unsolicited compliment.
Exactly.
If you see somebody, whether it's somebody you meet today, people who you've met, I'll put it in my world of journalism, if you read an article that you just think is really good, or you see somebody's a video or something, just sending them a note that says, I really enjoyed that. That's all it has to be. I promise you, we see those, and I remember the people who send me the unsolicited compliments. And for every single one, maybe that's coming on a little bit strong, but if something moves you, or if you see somebody give a report or a speech or something where you're just like, that was a really nice job, the unsolicited compliments are the best way to make an impression. Better if they're sincere, is what I would suggest. Don't just suck up to people. But you will find this too, is that when somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I thought that was really cool, you'll remember that person, what they say. So find opportunities to give people their flowers.
I have 3 things on networking, and I'm going to try to keep it quick. The first is it's about quality, not quantity. So it doesn't help to go and have 30 surface level conversations that don't mean anything with people and then connect with them on LinkedIn and never talk to them again. It's better to have a few meaningful conversations. Of course, now I can't talk.
Yeah.
A few meaningful conversations that actually resonate. So that's the first one. The second is, don't just go to people when you need something. Mm-hmm. Right? I have people all the time that come to me at this point in my career that ask for an informational interview. I almost always, to my assistants, very deep displeasure, say yes to informational interviews. But then if I never hear from that person again until they need something again, it doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth. I'd rather them have this informational interview, and then like 6 months later, oh, hey, Ashley, I saw this article that I just saw that you wrote this op-ed. I thought it was really cool, or this article made me think about you, or you posted that photo on LinkedIn. It looks like a cool event, whatever, right? Or update, I got the job. Thanks for your advice. So that's my second. Don't just ask when you need something. And the third thing is that be kind. It is not a zero-sum game, even if everybody around you makes you feel like it is. Because I promise you, the people that were an asshole to me when I was an intern, they come to me all the time now, and I'm less likely to be helpful to them than the people that were nice to me when I was an intern, right? Same thing, all my classmates, like all of the people I've worked in many congressional offices with, at this point in their careers, people are chiefs of staff. They work in senior leadership positions for the president and the vice president of the United States. They are doing so many cool things, and if I was a jerk to them when we were young and coming up, that wouldn't have served any of us, right? So be kind, and not just to be like gross or whatever, but be kind because it's important to be kind to people.
Awesome. So my last question for you all is, and maybe we can keep it brief, is if you could go back in time and speak to yourself at the beginning of your political career, what would you say?
Don't take it so seriously. Be serious about it, but you need to find a fun time for fun, time for yourself, time to be, travel, do some, even if it's just a moment where you like pause and say, wow, I really did a great job on that, and own it. And if there's any criticism, don't spend more than a minute on it. Like, just learn from it. But it's not that moment is not going to define you. It's all the moments of your life that are going to define you. So I would really stick with, if I had it to do over again, I would say have more fun. It's a serious thing, but it's not so serious that you can't value yourself and your life.
You'll get there when you're supposed to get there. I think for me, this industry is full of a lot of people who like burn very bright very quickly, and you're constantly comparing yourself to other people and thinking, well, why aren't I as well known, or why aren't I getting those jobs? And you get there when it's time for you to get there. And I think if I could have gone back in time and decreased my anxiety about arriving by, I don't know, 30%, that would have been great for my mental health.
I'm going to steal something from Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and then I'm going to add to it a little bit. And the first part is know your power, right? She has a whole book about it. It's very interesting. I recommend you read it. And the second is don't let them take it from you. And what I mean by that is don't let others decide what your self-worth is. You have to set it for yourself. You have to decide that you are enough. You're smart enough. You are motivated enough. You are intelligent enough. And don't let others put you down. Don't let others say that you're not able to accomplish this. I had a counselor in high school that told me I wasn't smart enough to go to college, and so when I finished graduate school, I sent them a graduation announcement, right? It's like, whatever. So don't let people put you into a box that you don't want to be in.
Awesome. Okay, can we do one round of applause? And then, does anyone have any questions? Yes.
If you could say your names and your grades in your high schools.
Hi, I'm Ava De Jesus. I'm a 11th grade student, and I go to Da Vinci Connect. And my question is, since you all voted, do you feel like there's any issues you missed on?
In terms of getting it wrong, or?
No, just like in terms like, I know there was like different, like you stated about the voting, about the bikes.
Oh, yes.
That was actually,
Yeah. So I was wondering, do you feel like there's any other issues on the voting path that you feel like you missed, that you would do it again?
Well, in every election, there are things that don't go the way that I want them to go.
Exactly.
Always, and that's part of the game, right? That is the price of admission to participate in this game called a democracy. And so, yes, there are always things that don't go the way that I want, and there always will be, and that's what it is to live in a democracy.
I think for me, as again, a journalist that looks at these things as both a citizen, but then also their stories, their sort of snapshots of where people are, I think that a lot of us are looking at how Proposition 1 did, which was the statewide measure for more money and housing to deal with homelessness and mental health issues. I'm drastically oversimplifying it. But this was a measure that was championed by Governor Newsom. We all thought it was going to pass pretty easily, and it just barely, like by a handful of thousands of votes passed. I think it surprised him. I think it surprised his team. I think it surprised us journalists. So I go back and think, well, what were we missing in the mood of the electorate that made people really, really skeptical? And what does that tell us maybe about how people are feeling about these issues of homelessness and mental health, and how should that inform our coverage?
Yeah, I would say, similar to what Ashley said, there not every time, but there are often going to be times what you voted for, or who you wanted in office, or the initiative or whatever didn't pass. Get over it. It's, move on. You had your voice, and other people had louder voices in that election, and that's just the way it is. That doesn't mean you should stop caring. There's going to be, it all comes, the thing about elections and voting, it's cyclical. It'll come again. It'll come every couple of years, and every 4 years is a presidential. So it's never a one and done.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Karen Alvaros. I'm a junior in high school, currently 17. I applied to be a USC student board member. Do you have any advice for campaigning?
I stay away from the campaign side like it's the plague, so I'm going to defer to my colleagues.
Well, what I would do is what you would do in any campaign: know what the issues are, and have a plan to address those issues. So I'm sorry, did you say you're running for office?
No, I applied to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're still going through the process of applications right now.
Oh, okay. Well, good luck. Good luck with that. I hope you get it, but once you do get it, know what the issues are, what the people in your school are going to be voting on, what's important to them, and why. And if your ideas to address what their concerns are, and even more. Sometimes people shoot for right here instead of shooting for the stars. And so if you have a bigger idea, then that will actually resonate, I think, with voters, because you're thinking about it. You have a platform. You have a campaign, if you will, on how to address that issue or that problem or whatever the situation might be. But don't be shy. I mean, I don't think you are, because you're running or want to run, but go out and meet people and talk to them. What's, the four most powerful words between two people are, what do you think? Use that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would just add on to that and say that in addition to taking the temperature, finding out what people want, figure out why you. Why should they choose you to help deliver that? And I think that comparing those two things, what is the point of view that you would bring to this job? Because I think a lot of times the reason people are sort of disillusioned about politicians is they think that they'll say anything to get somebody's vote. So of course, it's important to talk to your fellow students or people in your community to find out what they want. But then also, what of those things really resonates with you, and why do you think you'd be a good champion for that? And I think it's when a candidate can really sort of sell themselves as the person with the vision to see these things through, that's a successful candidate.
So spot on. I love this commentary, because some people run just because there's nothing else to do, or there's a logical person to run, or mom and dad want them to run, or they have a campaign, whatever, consultant that wants them to run. You have to ask yourself, do I want to run? Why do I want to run? And if you don't have an answer for that, you're not going to have an answer for somebody whose vote you're asking for. Dating myself, but if you YouTube this, a long time ago, Senator Ted Kennedy, who was President John F. Kennedy's younger brother, he was running for president. And he was interviewed by Roger Mudd, I'm sure
Right.
you know the name, a political journalist, very credible journalist. And he asked the senator, why are you running for president? He was a deer in the headlights. He could not come up with an answer. And this is a guy who came from a political dynasty. And it was just really a lesson in, if you're going to run for office, you better have an answer for that question. But it's a good lesson on how, interviews go as well.
Yes, 1, 2, 3.
So politics can kind of be confusing for the youth, or it feels disconnected. What do you think is a way to like educate people on it, or in other words, kind of dumb it down? Okay, that like lack of better words, but dumb it down so people understand and want to get involved.
Well, I think the most important thing is figuring out where is the place that you can get involved, right? So what do you care about? Right now, there's a big debate in my neighborhood because people fly down the street and we want speed bumps. So I have neighbors who can't stand me because I'm always coming to them with some kind of petition that are like, oh, Ashley, how do we get speed bumps? Because that matters to them, right? So figuring out what matters to somebody is the best way to get them involved. And usually it's something about their life. And it could be something as silly as speed bumps or parking permits or the street light or illegal dumping or whatever, right? And those are ways to get people in your community involved. And I think when you're interested in getting involved in politics, find something that you like. Maybe you love dogs. So you want to figure out what's happening in the state of California for animal rights. So then you can figure out what are we doing in LA for animal rights, and you can go to the SPCA and figure out what they're doing, and the LA Animal Shelter figuring out what they're doing. And so find something you're interested in and let it grow from there. You don't force it.
Go ahead. Yeah.
As women in powerful political roles, how do you make sure that your voice is heard and taken seriously in rooms that are predominantly male?
I wear a bold lipstick. I'm serious. I am so serious. And then I just speak with authority when it's time.
Yeah, not all the time.
Not
When
all
it's
the time, when it's time.
Don't speak just to hear your voice.
No.
Because then people aren't going to stop listening to you. But when you are selective about when you're going to say something, people will listen because you're very, very strategic about what you're saying.
And I will also say my default, which I've had to sort of train myself not to do, is to kind of like be self-deprecating and to sort of make a joke about, I sort of play down what credentials I have or things like that. And what I realize is like, that's just undercutting myself. It's just telling people like, don't pay attention to what she's saying. And I think finding ways that when you do speak up, you don't have to couch it with, well, this might be not a very good idea, but, or, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but it is shocking. And I have to listen to myself talk all the time when I listen to my interviews read back, which is terrible. The amount of times that you will do those types of things without even realizing you'll say something that'll start by undercutting it. This might be sort of dumb, but get rid of those things. Since when you do speak with a bold lipstick and when it's time to speak, just declarative sentences that with the authority that you know what you're talking about, because there's too many other things out there that can undercut you. You don't need to undercut yourself.
Just piggybacking off of this, something that I heard maybe a year ago and I've very much implemented it, is that as women, we say sorry. We all know, we say sorry all the time, like, oh, sorry, I just had this thing to add, or oh, I'm so sorry, blah, blah. And 9 times out of 10, you're not actually sorry. You just don't, you just are ingrained to say this. Yeah. So I have tried, every time I go to say sorry, I take a pause and I'm like, did I hurt somebody's feelings and I need to actually apologize, or am I apologizing for myself for existing? And if it's the latter, I remove it and I just say, instead of saying, oh, sorry, I have this thing to add, I have this thing to add. Oh, sorry, I'm late. Thank you for being understanding that there was traffic in LA, right? So I try to do a reframe, and that's helping a lot too.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that I know that we should be doing our research about politics and stuff, but is there any books or women that are in the politics that we can watch or read, or movies or just anything that will educate us young women about politics and stuff?
So many.
Oh my gosh.
I love Michelle Obama's. Michelle Obama's memoir was very moving. There's this memoir that is just fantastic, and I don't know if it's still PC, but Cheryl something, it's called Lean In, and it was very big in 2000, Stanberg.
Yeah.
So they're both super inspiring.
There's a new one that's out this week, and I can't remember what platform it's on, on Shirley Chisholm. Do you know who Shirley Chisholm was?
Our last panelist.
She was
Yeah.
the first woman to run for president, African-American woman in the 70s. And what's her name is playing her. I can't remember the name of the actress, but I can't wait to see it. In fact, I'm glad you asked the question. It reminded me I have to watch this movie. I can't remember which platform it's on, but I think it's called Chisholm. I can't remember who's playing her, but it'll come to me in a few minutes. I think you should watch that, because everybody always thinks, like, for my generation, Geraldine Ferraro was the matriarch. She was the vice presidential candidate for Mondale when he ran for president. I forget when that was, and I mean, this was in the 80s, and she was a spitfire, really smart, and just, I think didn't she go? It wasn't. It was George W. Bush. Was she the one who debated Dan Quayle, I think?
Oh, I think so, but I can't remember.
I know, I'm forgetting. But anyway, Geraldine Ferraro, she's since passed away, but she was the first woman on truly on a presidential ticket. Shirley Chisholm tried to be, but the fact that she tried as an African American woman in that time, I mean, I am so happy that they produced a movie. So watch that. It's out now. You could even check it out.
And then I just have a couple other random ones that aren't necessarily politics, but I think they're just inspiring as women. Hidden Figures, if you haven't seen that movie, it is amazing. Yeah. So if you just want to feel good, that's a good one. And also, I think it's called On the Basis of Sex. It's about RBG.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
was excellent.
Yeah.
So I would just look up, some powerful women figures, and I bet that there's a book or a movie about them.
Yeah, there's also not so much politics, but really activism in the local community movie called Best of Enemies. And it's about in the South, where it's an African American woman, and he's like a Ku Klux Klan member, and they have to get together to work on the school integration. Mm-hmm. And it's really well done. I mean, it gives me chills as I'm talking about it right now, because you think, talk about the challenges of integration with the backdrop of the co-chair as a Ku Klux Klan member. That's pretty intense. And it's a true story. And these two people, these two figures, an African American woman and the white man, as a result of this experience, were lifelong friends afterwards. And it just tells you how powerful relationships can be.
And then just one last one, because it's LA, there's a documentary about Dolores Huerta, who I would highly, highly recommend you all watch.
And if you ever get a chance to see her and speak, you should take it.
Yes.
There's also on right now on, I guess they call it Max now, it's not HBO, it's called Girls on the Bus. It's based on the book Boys on the Bus, which is about political journalists written in the 60s. This is based on the book Chasing Hillary by Amy Chozick, who was following Hillary Clinton's campaign. I've been watching it. I don't know if it's good or not. Like, I'm watching it right now and thinking, like, that's not how some of these things work. But some of it is actually, like, very true to what being on the campaign bus is like. And so if you just want, if there's a series that you just are trying to, be in this moment, they try to, I don't know how successfully, like, bring in, like, a TikToker as, like, the, like, new media person and the youth and all that stuff. Anyway, it is something, though, fun about the rhythms of the campaigns, and if you just want to sort of something that's in the zeitgeist right now, I have at least enjoyed hate watching it, which is as good of an endorsement that I can give for most journalism things.
I love that you use zeitgeist in the conversation.
Okay, I think we have time for one more, and then that'll wrap up our panel. Are you raising your hand? Yes, okay.
What are some difficulties you've had in politics that you've learned?
Difficulties in what?
Politics.
Politics that you have learned.
I learned that I wasn't as good of a listener as I thought I was. And that was a hard truth to wrap my head around. Earlier, one of the panelists made a comment about how it's important to speak at the appropriate moment. And I think when I was still young and coming up, I hadn't learned that yet. And I would talk to make sure that people were listening to me, even maybe when I shouldn't have. And that meant that I was so focused on talking that I wasn't actually listening. And so I missed a lot. And so as I've matured and learned and grown and worked on this, I've really tried to become a better active listener. And I think that's helped prevent a few scrapes, as Anne Shirley would say from Anne of Green Gables.
For me, as a reporter, I am the person that people will call to yell at if they don't like what's in stories, and most times they're wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong, so definitely having to, like, if I've gotten my facts wrong or if I, omitted keywords or something. There's nothing journalists hate more than having to do corrections on their stories. But by the way, just for news literacy purposes, always look for people who are willing to, like, cop when they've gotten something wrong. None of us are perfect. So there's definitely been a couple of times where I've had to put corrections on stories, and they're embarrassing, right? It means you made a mistake. But I've also sort of learned, like I said, a lot of people will call just to yell at you because they don't like their boss didn't come across great or story's not perfectly flattering, and that's not my problem. My job isn't to write stories that are flattering about them. And I learned the line, are you yelling at me because you're really mad at me or because your boss told you to yell at me? And 9 times out of 10, people go, the latter. And then I'm like, all right, well, like, you did your job, and I did my job by listening, and now we can move it on. And it also, like, means that I can talk to people. So being able to take criticism and being able to accept when you've made a mistake, but also not let it get to you when you haven't made a mistake, I think has been a key lesson.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, own it. If you made a mistake, own it. But also recognize, unless you've committed murder, it doesn't define you. That mistake is part of your lessons for life, and you may make it again, and you'll even learn from that time. But don't let it define you. There's a lot of outside influences that are going to be trying to define you. You define yourself and be authentic in the way you do things.
Yeah, you win or you learn. If you don't learn from it and you're not winning, you got a problem.
Yeah. On the other hand, even when I'm wrong, I'm confident, so I'm with that too.
Awesome. Well, if anyone else has questions, feel free to come up afterwards. But otherwise, thank you so much to our amazing panelists.